as time goes by, it seems that the position of Donald Trump is improving. I don't know in the United States in terms of 2024 presidential election. Donald Trump, in his recent interviews, he said that he's not interested in having any sort of escalation with Iran and Russia. And JD Vance recently had an interview in which said that we are not interested in having a big war, a war with Iran in the Middle East. Israelis want us to have, but we are not interested in having that type of war with Iran. And on one hand, you watch this type of rhetoric coming out of the Trump people. And on the other hand, when you see they're talking about Mike Pompeo, you're talking about Nikki Haley, Tom Cotton, these people who we know their policy, their vision toward the Middle East, the way that they're supporting Israel, or maybe Ukraine in that case. Is that gonna, how do you see if Donald Trump wins? Let's assume that. Is he going to bring a drastic change to Washington?
Donald Trump, in a recent interview, admitted that when he came into power in 2000, after the 2016 election, that he was not prepared to govern, and that he surrounded himself with people that came from the establishment. You know, the Republican side of the establishment. People who didn't have his best interests in heart. You couldn't say had the best interests of America. They had pursuing the policy objectives of a neoconservative element that had not run for election. The American people didn't vote for this neoconservative element, and yet here they are because Trump didn't have anybody to fall back on. They were empowered. Mike Bolton, John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, people of this ilk. And they were disastrous. And as a result, all the things that Trump said he believed in, like making better relations with Russia, things he tried to do, like denuclearizing North Korea, he wasn't able to accomplish. He was stabbed in the back, and at the end of the day, his foreign policy was just a disaster. The problem I have is what's to say he's not going to fall into the same trap? I know he has sat down with people like, RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, Tucker Carlson, and others, and said these are the Elon Musk. Whether you like them or not, it doesn't matter. They're not the establishment. They're the anti-establishment. These are the kind of people he should have surrounded himself with the first time. People whom, if they do get appointed to positions of power, will be able to shake things up. The big question, though, is Donald Trump capable of allowing people like this to steal his thunder, to steal the limelight, to shake things up? Or is he going to insist that he be the front man, that it has his stamp of approval on it? And what happens when they challenge him on some core things like, well, you don't want to go to war with Iran, but that means you're going to have to say no to Israel. But you took $100 million from this Jewish widow. Boss, what are you going to do? I don't have confidence in Trump's ability to stay the course. At the end of the day, I think he's a fundamentally weak man, and that his biggest weakness is his hubris and his narcissism. His inability to delegate responsibility, his unwillingness to delegate responsibility. And as such, he'll fall victim to his most base behaviors. And he's not a diplomat. He's a man who gets angered very easily, gets insulted very easily. And when you're the president, you get insulted, you end up giving speeches before the United Nations Security Council or General Assembly where you shout out fire and fury, fire and fury. And in this day and age where we are in very delicate relations with both Russia and China, shouting fire and fury may deliver just that, fire and fury. Iran is not in the mood to make any compromises to anybody. I don't think Donald Trump understands that. He thinks he's coming to the table with some sort of ability to put pressure on Iran. What? You backed out of the nuclear agreement. You stopped having the potential of economic trade. You've sanctioned Iran to the nth degree. You've threatened to bomb Iran. You've empowered Israel to attack Iran. And all Iran has done is build up counters to this that put Iran in a favorable position. And you want Iran to do what? Negotiate that away because you, Donald Trump, say they should? Iran's not going to bend over backwards for Donald Trump. He claims he has the ability to make a magic phone call to Vladimir Putin. I don't think that ability exists. I don't think it ever existed, but it definitely doesn't exist to this day. And to do the same to Xi Jinping, to threaten Xi Jinping with what? An economic war? Have you looked at the state of the American economy versus the state of the Chinese economy? I'll tell you, one can survive an economic war, the other one can't. And so in order to do realistic policies, Donald Trump's going to have to back down. He's going to have to, eat a little bit of crow, admit policy failure in the past and not take such a strong stance going forward to yield the road in large degree to his current adversaries. I don't think it's in Donald Trump to do that. So I don't have the confidence that Donald Trump is going to go rolling in there doing great things. I'm very afraid that he's going to go rolling in, think that he's going to make great things happen. And when they don't, he's going to revert to, past form, which is to fire the people that are giving him the advice of being friends and having non-adversarial relations, and surround himself again with the neocons who will end up getting us involved in a war. And a war with Russia means a nuclear war and we all die.
Do you think right now, is Russia concerned about what's going on in Ukraine? Because today we've learned that the Russian Federation is conducting a drill to use nuclear weapons. And how do you find right now the situation in Ukraine? We had Lloyd Austin visiting Kiev during the BRIC Summit. Right now, do you think that we can, as you mentioned, I personally don't believe that Donald Trump going to change it drastically, but do you think the deep state, those people who are making decisions in Ukraine, are going to send, at the end of the day, are going to escalate the conflict with Russia in the aftermath of 2024?
To what end? The Ukraine has lost. There's not a rational actor out there right now that can articulate a scenario that has Ukraine winning. No one. You have a bunch of irrational people there talking about the need for Ukrainian victory, but there's not a single person that can articulate a path to victory for Ukraine, especially one that starts from the current state of affairs. Total collapse on the Donbass front. Total collapse. Kursk, 2,000 Ukrainians surrounded, the other being slaughtered. The Ukrainian, we've been sending in these shipments. They're getting blown up. So even all the ammunition we're sending in is not making it out of the port of Odessa, let alone across the trains and into warehouses that are hit. The Russians have full-scale dominance. And we're rolling into wintertime when 90% of Ukraine's thermal power generation capability is gone permanently. It's not coming back, and you can't bring in enough power generation equipment to compensate for that. So you're going to see literal societal collapse. So you have military collapse at the front, societal collapse, you have economic collapse. Ukraine has no functioning economy. It needs continued underwriting by the West, and the West is getting tired of paying that bill. And you're looking at, the political collapse of Zelensky over the course of this winter. So remind me again, as we emerge from the winter of 2024, 2025, what victory looks like and how do you get there? This means that the only people talking about a potential path for victory have to articulate scenarios that are so extreme as to make you wonder what their purpose is. I mean, even Poland's given up talking about coming to the aid of Ukraine. They're now talking about building a new defensive line because they've accepted Ukraine's lost. It's finished. Can't help it. So they're talking about building a defensive line to separate them from the Russians and the Belarusians. This is the reality. The only hope Ukraine has is to get permission to use long-range weapons And Russia has told the West what the consequences of that will be. And I think this current nuclear exercise just proves that. Russia's sending a signal. We've told you what the consequences would be. I think your audience is guilty like everybody else. You forgot that we almost all died on September 14th. I mean, people seem, well, we didn't, therefore everything's okay. No, it's not. The reason why we didn't die is the Russians put the marker down that if you allow long-range strike weapons to, American, British provided, to be used by the Ukrainians to strike inside Russia, you become a party to the conflict, and Russia will hold you accountable to including using weapons against your soil. And those weapons may be nuclear in nature if you want to take it that route. In 72 minutes after the first nuclear weapons used, we're all dead. So, guys, that situation still exists today. Russia's simply reminding us that they're not joking. They're not bluffing. Russia's won this war. There's nothing we can do to stop this. But if we want to escalate, then Russia tells us what the price of escalation will be. And that will be a nuclear war, and we'll all die. So that's what's going on here. Russia's in no danger of losing the Ukrainian conflict. But Russia just wants to make sure that the West doesn't go totally insane in trying to prevent the total collapse of Ukraine, which is inevitable.
The problem here is that the way they're talking about North Korean soldiers being in Russia, fighting for Russia, it seems that to me that they're preparing for everything to send NATO soldiers to Ukraine to fight Russia. This is huge. This is problematic. That's why I think that in the aftermath of 2024, they may make a case that Russia is using North Korea and let's go fight Russia directly.
Who's going to go fight them? Name one country that's going to put boots on the ground inside Ukraine to fight Russians. Go. I'll play the Jeopardy theme song because you're not going to get any nation to do that because it's war. It's absurdity. You have idiots saying, oh, if the North Koreans are in Russia, therefore we will not, Lindsey Graham, we'll have to send our boots, Tom Cotton, boom, boom, boom. You're not seeing anybody in a position of power talking about that because, A, we don't have any boots to send. Where are we going to get them? Got 100,000 troops in Poland, Scott. How many of those are combat troops? 26,000? So we got 26,000 trigger pullers, and we've got to project them in over a line of communication that'll be vulnerable to Russian interdiction. We just talked about what it took to put an Israeli strike package into Iran. Imagine it's going to take a lot of Allied aircraft to put a similar strike package into Russia to start doing this, and Russia will respond. It becomes a big shooting war thing, go boom, boom, and we all die. There's no nation ready to project power into Ukraine. So it's an absurdity to even talk about this. And then the other thing is, what is the legal basis of this? Russia signed an agreement with North Korea. That agreement allows for them to come to the assistance of others in times of war. So if Russia and North Korea were to agree for North Korean troops to come in, there's nothing illegal about it. And first of all, if the North Korean troops were, for instance, deployed in Kursk, where all the rumors have it, that's Russian soil. How's that NATO's business? And if they're evicting Ukrainian troops from Russian soil, again, how's that anybody's business? It's not. But the thing is, nobody's proven that this is the case. No one's demonstrated that there are North Korean troops actually on their way to the Kursk front. So this is a big propaganda war, big propaganda battle being fought right now. But when I get nervous is when Americans and NATO people stop talking, because then I take them seriously. But as soon as their lips are moving, they're playing a propaganda exercise. So the fact that you have Americans and NATO and everybody talking about North Korean troops means they've got nothing. Nothing. Literally nothing's happening. Nothing's going to happen. They're not going to do anything. This is just a propaganda show. And I'll tell you this. I'll believe that North Korean troops are in Kursk when I see them. Until then, it doesn't make any sense from a military standpoint, anything. It doesn't make any sense at all.
And talking about last time we talked, we didn't have time to talk about BRIC Summit, and in which Russia and China together condemn what's going on in Gaza for Palestinians. And do you think this summit was capable of doing anything in favor of Palestinians, as long as we have we know that the UN is not capable of doing anything substantially in terms of what's going on in Gaza, in Palestine, in Lebanon. But what, in your opinion, what BRICS is capable, what is BRICS capable of doing in terms of what the situation in the Middle East?
As it's currently configured, not a damn thing. There's nothing BRICS can do, nor is BRICS expected to do anything. You know, I don't know why the world's rushing this. You know, BRICS, you know, they were, you know, when BRICS was created, you had people who were sort of the equivalent of, you know, grade school sweethearts, you know, innocent, platonic, you know, friends on the playground. You know, last year in Johannesburg, you know, there was a courtship. And this year in Kazan, the relationship was consummated. And you want him to give birth to a child right now that's fully grown adult, ready to do adult things? That ain't happening. BRICS now has consummated its union. And so they're in the process of, you know, a gestation period where they're now going to grow into something that's meaningful, has substance, etc. That's going to take time. It could take years. It could take decades. But the bottom line is that what was started in Kazan is basically a revolution against neocolonialism and American unilateralism. It doesn't mean that the neo-colonial enterprise disappears overnight and America disappears overnight. No, there will be a struggle. The struggle will be economic in nature. It will be diplomatic in nature. It will be, you know, global in scale. But it's going to take time. It doesn't happen overnight. So anybody who thought that BRICS was going to come together and suddenly solve all the world's problems doesn't understand what BRICS is. You know, it's like I mentioned the Bandung Conference of 1955. Most people now have to go and Google it because they don't know what I'm talking about. But it was a big conference put together by India and China together with Indonesia and you know, what today we call the global south. At the time we called the third world, primarily Africa and in Asian countries that were emerging from the yoke of colonialism. And the Bandung Conference, the purpose of Bandung was to bring to life the principles set forth in the five principle statement that India and China had put forward in 1954. Bandung Conference didn't achieve what it wanted to achieve because it took place during the Cold War, and the third world aspirations, what became known as the non-aligned movement, got suppressed by Cold War politics. But at Bandung, Zhou Enlai, the Chinese premier, said, what's happening in this conference guarantees that the colonial era will be finished within 20 years. And by 1975, the colonial era was indeed finished. Now, what was supposed to replace it was this emergence of the third world, a multilateral, consensus-driven, entity, but that never was able to mature because it never was able to complete the gestation period. Let's just say that the Cold War aborted it. And instead of, a post-colonial era, what we got was the neo-colonial era in the era of American hegemony, which is a neo-colonialistic relationship between the United States and the rest of the world. So the neo-colonial era has been governing unfettered since, 1975 onwards. What BRICS is the Bandung Summit of the conference of the modern era, without a Cold War that's going to destroy it. The BRIC Summit is the delivery of the promise made by Russia and China when they met on February 4th, 2022 in Beijing and signed their 5,000-word joint declaration about rejecting the rules-based international order, rejecting neo-colonial behaviors on the part of France and Great Britain and others. So that's what we're seeing. And they met and they have given birth to an institution that now has established ways of building consensus. Russia ran 200 events in the lead up to the summit. Many of them were at the ministerial level. This institutionalized the processes of bringing nations together and talking and working out problems. Eventually, this institutionalization will mature to the level where BRICS will be able to weigh in effectively on issues like Middle East peace, Palestine, etc. But for the moment, these institutions, they've just been given birth to, and now they have to grow, and they have to, solidify. They have to figure it out. You have to learn to crawl, then you'll walk before you run. You can't expect BRICS to be out there winning, Olympic gold medal winning times in the 100-yard dash when they haven't even learned how to, crawl. So it's unrealistic. And what'll happen in the meantime is that the individual BRICS nations will work together to come up with common policy objectives, because they did agree on principles that they will adhere to collectively. And those principles will eventually gel into a unified way of problem solving that will hopefully be used to supplement the United Nations system, if the United Nations system can be reformed. But if not, then to replace the UN as one of the world's leading geopolitical decision-making bodies.
Yeah. Just to wrap up this session, we had the agreement between Russia and China in terms of their intelligence, militarily. Their economy is totally connected with Russia and North Korea, and we are about to have a comprehensive agreement between Iran and Russia. It seemed that whoever wins in the United States in 2024 would face a new reality of the world in terms of militarily, in terms of the economy. And do you think this change that is happening, it's not drastically, but it's changing little by little, gradually it's changing. Do you think that would change the United States foreign policy in 2024? And maybe that would benefit peace in the Middle East or even in Ukraine?
I think anybody who's hoping that the United States will be a force for peace is hoping in vain. We're not a force for peace. We're not wired for that. The United States exists for war. We're a nation built on the principles of war. The modern incarnation of the United States is all about war. This is what Dwight D. Eisenhower warned us about in his farewell address in 1961, about the rise of the military-industrial complex working in concert with the United States Congress to destroy American democracy. It succeeded. American democracy today is literally a shadow of what it could be and what it should be. It doesn't matter that we can all go out and vote on November 5th. Look who the hell we're voting for. If you're here to tell me that the symptoms of American democracy that have manifested itself so that we have Kamala Harris representing the Democratic Party and Donald Trump representing the Republican Party, and you're supposed to tell me that this represents a politically healthy America, you're wrong. What it shows is America is the most unhealthy nation in the world when it comes to democracy and politics. We are diseased, deeply diseased. We have an establishment that requires global confrontation in order for the United States to thrive. Our entire means of interfacing with the world economically, diplomatically, etc., is through the interface of violence. Look at how we propose to solve the Israeli-Gaza conflict by providing billions of dollars more military assistance to Israel. We have no other option. We've got nothing else. Even to put pressure on Israel, it's stop selling Israel arms. As if weapons are the only thing we do, because it is the only thing we do. Look at Ukraine. That's all we have. Look how China interfaces with the world. The Belts and Roads Initiative, a $10 trillion infrastructure development program that has allowed China to win over the hearts and minds and pocketbooks of the world while we seek to destroy everything. The lead American representative globally these days is the regional combat commander, in the Middle East, Central Command. If you're the ambassador of a major Middle Eastern country, you don't get to do anything unless the CENTCOM representative's there, because the military's calling the shots. The same thing with Europe. It's the NATO people that count. Same thing in Asia. It's all about the military. The Pacific Command takes the lead on everything. Guys, if you think this is good, you're wrong. The military is not meant to be a diplomatic agency, and yet it has become the most important diplomatic agency of the United States, which tells you that our reason for existence isn't peace, it's war. That doesn't change by simply electing a new president. Donald Trump is an instrument of war. He speaks the language of peace superficially, but he's the instrument of war, of power. How he plans on projecting American economic power without backing it up with American military force. And it's always implied, even when he speaks peace, he's going to make the magic phone call. And I mean, his threatening to Putin, I'll make those domes disappear. How, Donald? You're going to hug him to death, baby? Oh, no, you're going to bomb Russia. So you're threatening violence again. That's all we know how to do. That's all the Democrats know how to do. That's all the Republicans know how to do. It's economic violence. It's military violence. It's political violence. The CIA exists to overthrow your government. Ask the Georgian people how it feels to be an American ally right now when you actually held a fair and free election that got a fair and free democratic outcome, and the United States refuses to accept it because we didn't want that outcome. And so now we're going to go in and we're going to cause problems. We have the CIA trying to stir up a Maidan type, revolution in Tbilisi like they did in Kiev. That's all we do, ladies and gentlemen. I wrote an article. I called it the American Midas touch. Because if you go back and talk about King Midas of ancient Greek mythology, people think, oh, that means that everything you touch is gold. You have the golden touch. Yeah, it also means that everything you touch dies. That's the American Midas touch. We're trying to turn everything into gold for us. But at the end of the day, we touch you, you die. Because it's all we know how to do is kill. Kill for our benefit. And so that's where we are right now. None of these candidates represent a force for peace. And America will never be a force for peace as we're currently configured.
Scott, we have 2 questions from our audience. Let me play it for you. The first is the earthquake on October 29th. Was the attack on Iran a fake out while Israel hit the tunnels in North Gaza? How would you respond to this?
I think you're comparing apples and oranges. Why do you need to fake Iran out in order to hit tunnels in North Gaza? Why can't you do both concurrently? I don't understand the question. I'm not being disrespectful. Maybe there's just a language problem, an interpretation problem.
Yeah,
but
I didn't get it as well. It seems that he's trying to say that the earthquake was to distract people from what's going on in Gaza.
But again, I can't make that correlation. So yeah. I can't. I don't even know how to answer the question.
And the other one is, do you think that Iran will attack Israel?
As an American, with an American mindset, I can come up with an argument that Iran retains de facto deterrence, having demonstrated the capacity to strike Israel, and that Israel has not achieved similar deterrence because their message to Iran was watered down for any number of reasons. That I could articulate to the supreme leader that we call this a wash and we move forward, that Israel's losing the war. We don't need to expand this conflict. Let's just let Israel fester in its own juices for the moment and finish it. But I'm not Iranian. Professor Morandi, whom you know very well, and whose opinion I respect very much, has what I would call an informed Iranian position, and that is that Iran will strike back because it has no choice but to strike back. Iran can't retain this deterrence, and deterrence has a lot to do with psychology and perceptions. And so, having me as an American, I perceive things in certain ways. My analytical models are based on assumptions that may or may not exist in an Iranian analytical model. So I have to defer to him in answering this question and say yes, because a very well-informed, level-headed, rational Iranian professional believes that Iran will respond, I will defer to that position.